Hey everybody, this is Peter with Tabletop Gaming Guild, and today we're going to be taking a look at another role-playing game. We're going to be taking a look at Spire, The City Must Fall by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard. It came out in 2018 and has won a bunch of awards. It is a really cool game about revolution and rebellion. Spire is a mile-high city that is ruled over by the Alfir, the High Elves, and there in the city are the Drow, the Dark Elves, who are subjugated and forced into slavery for a period of their lives. And you and your friends are some of those Drow. And throughout this whole game, taking place in just this one city, you are going to be leading a rebellion against the Alfir. So we'll take the book down to the table and we'll open it up. We'll read about what the game is about and how it's played, and then we'll come back up and I'll give you my final thoughts on Spire, The City Must Fall. All right, everybody. So we are down to the table with Spire, The City Must Fall by Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor. We're going to flip over the book and read the back. Let us know what we're getting into. You are a dark elf. You have sworn in blood and sacred shadow to destroy your oppressors, the Alfir, high elves from the frozen north who have claimed your homeland as their own. Spire is a mile-high metropolis, and you hide in its crumbling temples, its lawless undercity, its labyrinthine tunnels, the rotting hole in reality that festers at its center. Your masters while away their days in opulent cruelty and glittering sunlight far above. Spire is all the world you have ever known, and it must fall. How far are you willing to go for the revolution? And what sacrifices will you make to see the Drow in control of Spire once more? Spire is a fantasy punk role-playing game of intrigue, subterfuge, and sedition. You and your friends will become a cell of desperate Drow freedom fighters and claw back control of the city from your Alfir overlords, no matter what it takes. It uses a simple rules system that helps you to tell stories of brutal rebellion where life is cheap, alliances are temporary, and magic is strange and perilous. This book contains all the rules you need to run games in Spire, along with a detailed breakdown of the districts and factions that make up the city. Published by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, 2018. For more about Spire, go to rowanrookanddeckard.com. So that's right, everybody. We're going to take a look through the book for Spire, The City Must Fall, a very unique and interesting role-playing game that takes place in a singular location and is all about revolution and the rebellion. So let's get ready to dive on in. All right, so let's go ahead, open the book. And our first section here that we have to look at is our table of contents. So the book is broken down into a bunch of sections. Welcome to Spire, the world of Spire, the rules of the game, skills and domains, equipment, bonds, and then our character classes, so the types of characters that we can be playing as, combat, and then 8 different districts and factions that are broken up throughout the city of Spire that we will have the opportunity to probably run into and to work with or fight against. There's also a section on running the game for the games master, and then there are 7 appendices here at the end for some more information. And then there's a character sheet and an index, and then a thank you to all the backers who backed the game. So like I was saying, reading the back of the book, this game is a game all about oppression and rebellion, rising up against the oppressors. And so you'll see here that we do have different types of characters that you can be playing as, their classes, but there's no choice of ancestries or races in this game because you will be playing as the Drow, the Dark Elves of the city of Spire. And according to the lore of Spire, the Drow have called this place home for a long time, but a couple hundred years ago or so, the High Elves, or the Alfir, attacked the city of Spire and took it for their own, and now they oppress the Drow of the city. And you will be playing as the Drow who are rising up against those oppressors, trying to take back your city for your people. So we look here at the very beginning of the book. The Welcome to Spire section has this really great outline of the city itself. This is the best image that we get in the book of what Spire may or may not look like. The origin of the city itself is shrouded in mystery. There's a section of the book here that talks a little bit about some of the guesses, some of the ideas about where and how Spire came to be. But the book leaves the actual beginnings of the city vague and shrouded in mystery. So this is a good picture of the city, and then these are kind of little layer outlines of different sections of the city as you go from the bottom to the top. So at the very, very bottom of the city, beneath the city, we have the heart, then the undercity, and then upwards all the way through the city to the very top, which is New Heaven, where the Alfir are mostly up here at the top of the city, and the lower class you are, the further down in the city you're going to call home. So this is a really cool and interesting idea. I like the idea of a role-playing game that takes place in a singular location. But at the same time, in that location are all these different places that get fleshed out in the book itself, the different districts and the people and the factions that are in them. And so your game is going to take place in this city. And we do have a little bit of information kind of getting us ready for the fantasy that is Spire. It tells us here that magic is hard. Magic items are rare. We're not off to the wilderness. This is not a book about adventuring and going to far off flung locations. We are in Spire for the whole of the game. That doesn't mean that they don't give us a little bit of information about the land around it, but for this book here, for this game, we are going to be playing in the city of Spire. Here it says there's no morality system. No one thinks that they're the bad guy. So that's the idea there. Even the Alfir do not see themselves as the bad guy. They believe that all of their actions are justified. And the same goes for you as the rebellion. You see that your actions are going to be justified no matter what they are. And there aren't any monsters. Everybody that you're going to be coming up against in this game, they're people, they're individuals, they have lives and they have ambition, and you may betray them and you fight for them. And everyone here, there's no goblins in this game, where a lot of people who play in the games with the goblins, they're the fodder, they're the can of fodder. You can mow through them without any usual feelings of remorse. Now that's not every game, but that is a lot of games where you play and you're fighting monsters. This is not that game. There aren't any monsters. Everything you struggle against here is a person. So playing in this game, the majority of the time you're going to be rolling D10s or 10-sided dice, and that explains that in this game. You don't have hit points. You're going to have different resistances, and we'll look at those here in a little bit. And you will be gaining stress against those resistances, and stress is bad. The higher your stress gets, the more likely you're going to have a fallout. And when you do, you start to take detrimental effects to your character. This is going to be a tough game, and one where more than likely at some point your character will die. So the next section here, the world of Spire, tells you a little bit about Destera, the land where Spire is located. You get some information on the Drow, the Alfir, the curse that the Drow are under, where they cannot be in direct sunlight, and so they must be careful so that they do not end up dead just from that. And then also there are the humans. It talks a little bit about the humans. Again, they're not a playable ancestry. Neither is the Alfir, just the Drow. But it gives us a little bit of information about the humans. They are short-lived, like humans normally are, but they are actually very technologically advanced because they do a lot of digging in the world, the ruins of the old world. And so the humans are actually more of the technology people. They're not ruling here in the Spire, but they are looked to for their industry with technology. We get a little information about Drow traditions in the world and the Alfear traditions as well. And then we get introduced to the ministry. So the ministry itself is it's the group that your Drow are going to be a part of, because the ministry is the ministry of our hidden mistress, and it is kind of the head of the rebellion. It is who are rebelling against the Alfear, which is why you are a part of that group. And then we have the ministry, and this is the group that your party is a part of. This is the ministry of our hidden mistress, or just the ministry, and they are sworn to destroy and subvert the dominion of the Alfear within the Spire. So here's that little section I was telling you about that talks a little bit about maybe where Spire came from. And then here are the things to know if you're going to be playing this game. You want to subvert, don't destroy. This is a city that you hope to take back and have for your people once again. So your main goal is not to destroy everything or even to kill everyone, but to subvert those in power and regain control of the city. This is not a kind world. You are definitely born into a group that is part of the underclass, and the world is not kind to them. And so you are going to be fighting to make your world better, but know that the world you're born into is not a kind one. You are brave. You're going to be a brave individual. In your mind, you're going to be the heroes because you are trying to wrest your city back, your world back for your people. And it says, you're going to be doing things that are morally in the gray area. Like we said, there's no morality in this world. So, and it says here, you're going to hurt people. You are a part of a world where even your family members, if they're not part of the ministry, they would probably turn you in for being part of the ministry if they found out. And so there's a good chance that you're going to hurt the people you love, the people who are in your life, because you think you know what's best, and that is to rebel against the Alfear. And so you have to be careful who you talk to, because they might be listening in for the Alfear. And this is going to kill you one way or another. You are going to die doing this. It says maybe you've made your peace with it, and maybe you're lying to yourself and saying that you're smarter than everyone else. But if you stay active in the ministry, you're going to wind up dead or mad or destitute or all three. So this is very likely going to kill you. There's always another level. The game is never going to be over. You might win back a street, but good luck winning a district. If you might win a district, but good luck taking back the entire Spire. There's always another level. There's always another bad guy. Your own family, like I said earlier, would sell you out, and the ministry itself would sell you out. If you get to the point that you're known, your cover is blown, the ministry is going to disavow you. They are not going to call you one of their own. They will watch you burn, or they will burn you themselves to keep the rebellion from falling with you. Next section of the book are the rules, and the core mechanic of the rules is the fact that we're going to be rolling some D10s. The game is very much about, they tell the games master to only make you roll if it is important, if there is something on the line. If it's easy and there's no real big risk of failure, or nothing bad is going to happen if you fail, there's no point in rolling. Just have the conversation that is the game and move that forward as you're talking. But once you get to the point where something is on the line, your failure or your success matters. Then it's time to roll some dice, and you're going to be rolling D10s for that. And this chart here is going to let you know what could happen with what you roll. If you roll a 1, it's a critical failure, and you're going to take double the stress. And we'll talk a little bit more about stress, but stress is the only time the games master is actually going to be rolling any dice in this game. And they're going to be usually either rolling D3s, D6s, or D8s to find out how much stress your character is going to take towards their resistances. If you roll a 2 through a 5, you fail and you take stress. But again, that's not double stress, just regular stress. If you roll a 6 through a 7, you have succeeded, but at a cost. So you're going to succeed. What you want to do happens, but you also take stress. If you roll an 8 through a 9, you succeed and take no stress whatsoever. If you roll a 10, you have critically succeeded, and you can inflict +1 stress for each 10 you roll. So you're not going to be rolling usually just one D10. You're probably going to be rolling multiple D10s. I believe it's mostly up to 3 or 4 D10s maximum. And depending on how difficult the task is, as the games master decides, they might actually remove some of your D10s because of how difficult your task is. And they'll be deciding that on a case-by-case basis. So again, the difficulty is where they'll be deciding that. If it is a standard difficulty, it's a 0. If it's very challenging, it's 2. And again, that allows the games master to remove some of the dice from your pool of D10s so that you're going to be rolling fewer of those. Also, there are group checks that you can be making. And then stress down here, it explains affects your different resistances. And you have 5 resistances. You have your blood, which is physical damage and exhaustion. You have the mind, which is mental stress, instability, and insanity. You have silver, which could be a loss of money or resources. You have shadow, which could be a loss of secrecy, damage to cover identities, police and government attention, and then reputation, which would be your loss of social standing in a group or community. So on your character sheet, as we will see back here at the back of the book, I'm going to go ahead and flip to it real fast so you can see it. On the character sheet, it lists your resistances. And then you're going to be keeping track of how much stress you take to each of those resistances, and that will equal out to your total stress. You will have the opportunity to gain some free slots possibly. So if you were to go through those free slots and then still take stress, you would start to take account of those stresses. But you may or may not have free slots for those resistances. So we'll get back to this in a little bit, but I just wanted to show you what that looks like for the resistances. There is a way to remove stress in the game. You have 3 ways that you can be doing that. You can lay low to remove all the stress that you have suffered, but it does tell you here the plot will move on. Something is going to happen outside of your control if you decide to lay low. It's kind of like you decide, I'm too hurt, I've got to go rest for days and days. Well, the plot doesn't stop moving forward. You're going to be behind. You're going to have to play some catching up afterwards. You can also act to remove the stress in a particular category. You're going to narratively explain what it is you're doing to remove that stress. And then a D3, D6, or D8 will be rolled depending on the length you go to in order to recover. And then you can refresh by acting in accordance with your character's refresh actions. So each character has a specific way that they can refresh their abilities. So they take that refresh action. And then again, when you refresh, you're going to remove either D3, D6, or D8 of stress, depending on how fully and how dramatically you fulfilled the requirements of your refresh action. The great thing about all of these sections is they do have this bit in italics where they give you some examples of how that could play out. Here it talks about keeping track of your stress, and their preferred method they write here is that the games master, the GM, would actually be the one keeping track of each player's stress. But that also, I feel like, would be a lot of work for the GM to do, because then when you need to know how much stress you have, their job is to kind of verbally describe to you what state of stress you are in. I think probably I'll end up running this where the players keep track of their own stress, and I would have them describe it to me, probably how they look when it comes to how stressed are they. But we'll get back to that a little bit later as well. But I think keeping track, would be mostly for the players. Like I mentioned, we have additional resistance slots, and then we have fallout. So fallout is the mechanic that causes you to, it's why you're getting stress. Why are you gaining stress? And it says here that each time a player character takes stress, the games master checks for fallout to see if there's any kind of ongoing serious effect at play. So every single time the player does something and has to roll and then gains stress, then the games master is going to see how much stress you have and then make a roll. If your current stress level is 2 to 4, and the fallout is triggered, that means the games master rolls a d10 and they roll below this number, then a minor fallout takes place. If you have 5 to 8 stress and they would roll a d10 and they would roll below that number, then a moderate fallout would take place. And then if you have 9 plus and the GM rolls below that number on the d10, a severe fallout takes place. And there are lists here of what could happen under a minor fallout, under a moderate fallout, or a severe fallout. And each of these effects has beside them the type of resistance that the games master is rolling against at that time. So this is why stress is bad, because the higher the stress you get, the more easily the games master will roll below your number. And then a severe fallout could possibly happen, or a moderate fallout could happen. So you're going to want to be keeping track of your stress. But at the same time, if you don't take any actions, you won't get any stress, but then you're not doing anything. You're not changing the world. So you're going to be taking big actions. You're going to be gaining stress. You will have the opportunity to lower that stress, but at the same time, every single time you take stress, there is the possibility of these fallouts. So you can see here that some of the minor fallouts could just be bleeding or stunned, and it gives a little description about what that means in game. But you can get, again, all the way up to a severe fallout. And in these severe fallouts, you could be dead. You could be dying, and you have to choose. Like right here, dying, it says choose, do something useful before you die, or desperately try to cling on to life. And there are different things here that you can try to do as your character begins the process of dying. There's also a bit here about bond fallouts. Bonds are the characters, the NPCs that your character is connected with. And so there is information here about some of the fallouts that could happen to those bonds that you have to those NPCs. The next section of the book we're going to be talking about is skills and domains. So our section on skills and domains says your character will have access to skills and domains when the game begins and have the opportunity to gain more through advancement. There are no levels or values in these. You either have them or you don't. And so you have this list of skills here that you may or may not have when you choose your character. Your character should give you, I believe, 2 skills and 2 domains. When you're playing the game and you're going to take an action, if you have the relevant skill, then you are going to get to add a D10 to your roll. And if you also have the domain with your action that you want to perform, you'll get another D10. And so when you roll those D10s, you're going to pick the highest one. You're not adding them together or anything. You're just going to pick the D10 that has the highest roll on it. And then you will compare that again to the chart that we saw earlier to see how well you either succeed or fail at the action you are trying. So there's the skills and there's the domains. And then you also have the possibility of getting a knack. And a knack is if you were to choose or to get the same domain or ability or the skill twice, if you would get it a second time, then you could choose a knack instead with that. And so you're going to be getting mastery in that skill or that domain, and that would give you the possibility of having another die that you would be rolling. You're always going to have at least one die. And again, you have the ability to add the skill and the domain and possibly a knack, which would give you, again, I believe at most 4 dice to be rolling at any time. Then we have our section here on equipment and buying and selling equipment. And so that just lists information about weapons, range and ammunition, and then tags that could be relevant to the weapon that you might have. And each of these tags has a little bit about what that does for you if that weapon has that tag. So like, for example, if your weapon has the tag of concealable, then when you attempt to conceal this weapon, you get to roll with mastery. So you would get to roll an extra d10 to conceal that weapon. Or maybe it is a defensive weapon. While using this weapon, you gain an additional armor resistance slot. And so armor is going to kind of help you take less stress. And then each of the weapons, even unarmed damage, says how much stress it can cause to your opponent if you were to hit them with it. So there's 1 stress or a D3 stress, D6 stress, or D8 stress to your opponent. We have a little section here on armor, and then also a section on making your own weapons and armor. Our next section is bonds, and like I was saying earlier, these are the NPCs that you gain a relationship with. And so you're going to take a look at that to learn a little bit more about bonds, bond fallouts, bond levels, and also combining bonds. So the bond level here is that there are 3 levels of NPCs. There are individuals that you may have a bond with. There are street level of bonds, which is like a small to medium organization that you could have a bond with. And then there is a city bond, which is a district-wide organization with considerable influence that you may have a bond with. And so the bond doesn't always mean a specific individual. It could, again, be a smaller organization or even a larger organization that you have some sort of working relationship with. So our next section is getting ready to get into making our characters and choosing your character's class. So it talks a little bit about creating your character, which again, you would get your character sheet out for. You can determine as much or as little of their backstory as you would like. Advancing a character, there's no experience points in this game, but it says here that if you make a change to the city of Spire, then your character will advance. And when they advance, you're going to be either having a low advance or a medium advance, or possibly even have a high advance. And that depends on what level of change you're making to Spire. And the change doesn't even have to be a positive change. It could be a negative change. But when you cause a low change or a small change, moderate change, you're either going to have a low advance or a medium advance, or again, like I said, possibly a high advance. There is information here about possibly multi-classing that you can read. And then there is the durance. So a durance is what your character did, what your drow character did during their 4-year term as a servant to the Alfear. Every drow in the city has to spend at least 4 years in servitude to the Alfear. And so one of the first things you'll be doing as a character, as making your character, is choosing what you did during those years and how is that going to affect your character. And so there is a list here of some different endurances that they have come up with for the players to choose from. But at the same time, you may decide with your GM to come up with your own endurance if there's not one listed here that you want to use. And so you would just work with your games master to decide how that worked for you and then what benefits it would give you in the game. And now we're into the character classes. So you have, what I'm going to do is I'll just read the title and then this little teeny couple sentences about each one, and kind of give you just a flavor of them. And they each come with this really cool piece of art. I know I've not mentioned it yet in this game, but I absolutely love the art in this book. I think it's very evocative and it has a very unique, distinctive style that I'm a big fan of. So, first character class, the Azurite. You are a trader, deal maker, and hustler from the South Docks, clad in sacred blue and gold. You are welcome almost everywhere and have connections all over Spire from previous business deals and debts owed. Each one is then also going to give you your core traits, your bonds at the beginning of the game, your starting equipment that you have as well. And then you'll see here the core abilities described and your advances. So if you were to advance with this character and you make, again, like we said, a low or a moderate change, small change to Spire and you advance, then you would get to choose a new ability from the low advances. And then if you were to ever cause a medium-sized change in the city, again, this is all GM discretion, then you would have the ability to grab one of these medium advances and add it to your character as well. And then same thing for the high advances. So these are going to be what you get when your character advances in this game. There is the Bound. I like this. Very, very rogue-like art. I like it. But there's the Bound. You are an acrobatic vigilante accustomed to dealing quick and decisive judgment to criminals. You worship the small gods in your armor, your ropes, your weapons, and they take care of you. There's the Carrion Priest. Part of the followers of Charnel, a heretical sect of death worshippers who live atop Spire in the towers and oubliettes of New Heaven. You believe that the bodies of the dead should be eaten by sacred hyenas to ensure the safe passage of their souls to the afterlife. The Firebrand. You are a revolutionary, a rabble-rouser, a dangerous criminal in the eyes of the authorities who hangs out in the lawless undercities of Red Row and Derelictus. As you gain power, the people of the city begin to worship you, and you can bestow blessings on them by focusing their belief through your actions. There's the Idol. You are a beautiful artist and revolutionary, and your creations can reshape the world through bleeding edge, half-understood sorcery. The Knight. You are a member of an ancient order of knights who were given the right to police the northern river docks of Spire. Over the centuries, your order has splintered and become ever more corrupt, and now you are little more than heavily armored gangsters with a penchant for organized fighting tournaments. The Lahan. The Lahan are silvered, are the chosen of our glorious lady, the light side of the moon, whose light does not burn the drow as the sun's rays do. Lahan serve her and spread her wisdom throughout Spire, providing aid and nourishment to the impoverished drow. There are the Masked. You spent your durance serving a high elf master in the upper echelons of Spire. You are accustomed to wearing a ceremonial mask. You are well accustomed to wearing a ceremonial mask in company, as all Alfir and their servants are expected to do, and you are a master of subterfuge, going unnoticed and quiet acts of rebellion. The Midwife. You are one of a line of ancient scholars and defenders of the Drow, blessed with an arachnid bloodline that you have been taught to augment via sorcery and meditation. In addition to this, you are responsible for the future of your race. You take care of unborn Drow while they gestate in their egg sacs, watching over them and keeping them safe from harm. The Vermitian Sage. The Vermitian Sage is a grand failure, an attempt at a mass transport network in Spire by overfunded human retro-engineers that buckled the walls between worlds and fell into ruin. Now, in the maze-like tunnels and dead-end corridors, a sect of Drow historians is attempting to use the non-Euclidean space to store information and relics of their home nations. You are one such Drow, a sage of the Vermitian Vault. They're like a really cool librarian person. I like it. Here are extra advances, possibility extra advances that you can add into the game as well. And these ones are not limited by class. So they have a long list of those that you can add into your game as well. And then here they get into combat. So combat is pretty interesting in this game. It's very different than anything I've done before. There's no real initiative here. They say that the person who jumps into combat first is the one who it makes the most sense. Maybe they're the ones who stated that they wanted to do an action that's leading to combat. Then they're going to be the person who gets to go first. There's even the possibility of the same person taking multiple actions in a row, as long as that seems to make sense at the table. And then everybody else can get in on the action as well. They said, you can go around the table if that's what makes sense for you, but it's mostly whatever makes sense for you and for the games master at the table. They get into the fact that there are 3 types of ranges in the game. Melee is when you're fighting toe to toe, and then ranged can be between buildings. And then if you're even further than that, there is extreme range, as long as you have a weapon that can feasibly attack from that distance. Information on armor and reloading and the stress that applies from weapons. There's also post-fight, the aftermath of the fight itself. And then they give you this nice little cool example of a fight in the game. So again, that you can kind of see how it would play out at the table. So a large chunk of the book now is each of the 8 districts and the factions in those districts. And so I'm just going to kind of skip through that section. But this is going to contain a ton of lore for the game's master as they bring the world of Spire to life. And so there's a whole bunch of those, and it takes up quite a bit of the next portion of the book itself. So we're going to keep on going through the book. And the next section is running the game. So this section is, again, more for the games master, but it gives you the idea of what it is to run a role-playing game, and specifically running this game. They give you some tips about getting the game started for your table and checking in with people about, this is a heavy game. The topics of it are heavy and can be fairly dark and hard to handle at times. And so they give you some ideas on how to possibly run this game for your players, but also keeping in mind your players' comfortability level as they play the game. So they talk about talking to each other, setting some boundaries, using lines and veils, which is about the hard lines that you don't want to cross, and then the things that you're okay with talking in generalities, but not specifics, and those are the veils. They give the X card, which is just a way for people to be able to say, I don't like what's happening right now at the table. This topic is hard for me, but without having to actually say so. And then they have some general advice for the GM running the game. And again, this is so interesting to me. You never roll dice, it says. It's kind of true, but not exactly. You will be rolling to see how much stress is given when the players take actions, but other than that, the GM is not going to be rolling dice. And then it gives some information on the theme and tone of the game, people as things, punk, religion as power, and brutal violence and uncomfortable decisions. So this again is a game where the theme is rebellion and revolution, and there are people that are being subjugated by others. And so there's going to be talk possibility of, of racism and of slavery. And so when those topics come up, it can be uncomfortable, but that is part of Spire. And so it's a very interesting idea. Then they go over kind of for the GM again here, how to set up your game, because this is a very unique game. And so it might be very unusual for a lot of people. I know that it will be for me when I finally am able to run the game. And so having this section of the book is huge because it gives you a structure that you can follow in organizing your campaign or your sessions. And it talks about breaking it down, the revolution itself, breaking it down into 3 sections. There's stage 1, the gathering storm, and it's all about getting the information and the supplies together and finding out from that information who needs to be eliminated or who's in charge of who and who can be turned possibly to your rebellion. Then stage 2 is the strike. This is going to be where the players push their plans into action and attempt to affect great change in Spire. And then there's stage 3, the aftermath. What is the fallout once the dust settles from the strike? And then so you give you these real quick little glimpses of how the structure is played out, but then also they give us a fuller, more detailed idea of running the gathering storm and running the strike, and then also running the aftermath, and then how to apply difficulty in the game itself. And so how to apply difficulty ratings to the different tasks that the players are attempting so that you know exactly, again, how to set those difficulties. And because when you set the difficulty, again, you're removing dice from the player's ability, from their role, making it harder for them to succeed. Also then how to build and run a good villain in this game. They give you some examples there. And then the other factions, and then making the city your own. It talks about magic in the game. It talks more about the ministry and what it looks like. And then it talks about villainy. Once you're through all of that, you are into a little bit more of like the deep lore of Spire as you get into the appendix of the game. So there's appendix 1, which talks about the gods. There are lots of different gods because there's a lot of people coming to Spire from around the world. And so it talks about the gods who hold sway here in Spire, the gods that people worship. And it gives you a few here that you can read about and possibly, again, utilizing them in the game itself. So there's a few of those. Each of them have their own work of art as well. Some of them are really awesome. I love the art in this game. I did mention that earlier. Oh, I love this one. It's fantastic. The use of the shadow and the black throughout this just makes all this stand out, and it's fantastic looking. Appendix 2 is for random items and events that might take place in Spire itself. So we GMs, we love our tables. Appendix 3 is the Drow glossary, and so it is a quick rundown of some of the bigger words and terms used in the game. Appendix 4, Rumored Goats of Spire. I'll leave that for you if you decide to get the book and run the game. And then Appendix 5 here, Known Arcologies and Discoveries Found Therein. These are the places that have been found around the world and some of the technologies that have been discovered within those arcologies. Appendix 6 has a couple tables that you can roll on for antagonists in the game. And then Appendix 7 is suggested media. So if you're looking to create the right theme and evoke the right feel for the game, here are some music, some books and comics, some role-playing games, some films, TV, and others, things that you can look into that might help you understand the feel that they want or they have in mind for this game. Back again to your player sheet and then an index for the book itself. So here on the player sheet, you'll see that you've got a place for your player name, your character name, the class you have chosen, and their endurance. Again, your class is going to give you, your class and your endurance, you're going to get 2 skills and 2 domains at the beginning of the game. You may eventually get some knacks if you were to get one of these skills or domains a second time. Equipment that you're going to start the game with, your refresh ability, which is going to help you get rid of all of your stress. Usually your refresh is like once per session kind of ability. Other abilities that you may gain in the game, the bonds that you have and create, what fallout you have gone through and what those are doing to you, and then your main resistances here and your current stress levels. So that is the character sheet for your character in Spire. And that, everybody, is Spire, The City Must Fall. Thank you for looking through that with me. Let's go ahead and come up from the table and I'll give you my final thoughts on this game. All right, so we're back up from the table and we have taken a close look at Spire, The City Must Fall by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard. If you are interested in learning more about this, you can head over to rowanrookanddeckard.com to find out about this game and the other games that they put out. Some of them taking place in the same world as Spire, but this game looks and sounds so interesting. I have really enjoyed reading through the book, finding out a little bit more about it. I've watched other videos that people have put out. There are some actual play videos of people playing the game. And just the fact that it just seems so different than the other role-playing games that I have played. I like the fact that it takes place in a singular city, even though that city is vast and there are so many peoples there and religions there. So it feels like a world in and of itself, but the fact that you're confined to this one location, I think is really cool. The fact that we're rolling D10s and we're taking stress, and the stress builds, and as the stress builds, there's a higher chance that we're going to take these huge, terrible effects to our characters, possibly to the point of death, is really interesting. The fact that the games master doesn't really need to roll much dice in this game gives them the ability to focus on the story that is being created. I know that, I've run games where you're running so many different bad guys, and you're looking at their stat blocks and you're trying to figure out what's the best thing to do, what's the optimal thing to do with this bad guy. With the removal of that needing to roll dice and needing to look through this stat block for this character, but being able just to focus on the NPC themselves, I think is going to free me up and free other games masters up to come up with really cool ideas and descriptions of what is happening in the story. Because again, a role-playing game is all about that shared conversation, that shared story building that is taking place between the games master and the players. And so being able to remove some of that paperwork, that workload there, I think is going to be a huge benefit to the story itself that is being built and told by everyone around the table. So I'm really looking forward to getting the opportunity to run this game for my friends. I can't wait to read even more about the lore of the world and to kind of go back in and read it again and take more in, and then start to use the structure from inside the book on how to build the adventures and then to run these sessions for my friends. I think there's a really cool story that's going to take place, and I can't wait to be a part of it. So Spire, The City Must Fall looks amazing, sounds awesome. The art is great. It's wonderful just to look through for that. And so I'm really looking forward to diving more into Spire, The City Must Fall, and then running it for my friends. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, go ahead and subscribe and like the video as well. And then head on over to our channel to check the other videos that we have there. We're putting out multiple videos a day half the time, definitely a single video a day for sure. But we talk about board games and role-playing games, We put out our show that we put out, used to be a podcast and now is our show that we release every few weeks as well, talking about board games and the game mechanics and what we enjoy about games themselves. So definitely check those out as well. Thank you for watching, everybody, and until we talk again, keep on playing games.